Welcome back, guys. We are back here on Chatooine, the best and brightest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. Here on Chatooine, we discuss all the biggest topics in the Star Wars fandom, as well as reviews, debates, and news coverage. So join us as we chat about the greatest franchise in the world, good old Star Wars. And today we're talking about one of the many future Star Wars films that are in the works, apparently. We're talking about the James Mangold Star Wars film that was announced in April of this year, 2023, by Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy. Apparently, the movie's going to be set, I think, over like 25,000 years into the future. And this was I think, out of the three that were announced at Celebration earlier this year, we had the Rey Star Wars movie, we had the Dave Filoni movie that's like the Mandoverse finale, and then we had this one, which is like the Dawn of the Jedi era. So I think out of all of them, this is the most unique one that they announced. And I also think, strangely enough, it's the least likely to happen just because of everything that's kind of surrounding it and everything. So, as per usual, we'll do a little roundtable of like our kind of initial reactions to this announcement back in April of 2023 this year. I'll start off by saying this is the one that I am most excited for. I think that the concept of this is something that needs to be addressed in Star Wars. And I think we lost Palpatine's, but not to worry, we're still flying half a podcast. Anywho,
he's back. He's back.
Oh, welcome back, sweetheart.
Sorry about that. New software. I'm gonna have a boomer moment every now and then.
That's okay, as long as we all know I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
So yeah, this new Star Wars movie with James Mangold, I think him being the director is a good idea. I think Lucasfilm has had both of these situations in mind for a very long time. I think they have wanted to have James Mangold in a Star Wars movie. He said that he was going to be doing the Boba Fett movie. That was something that was in the works for a little bit. And we talked about that last week on the last show. And then we also had this idea of like the Dawn of the Jedi and the beginning of the Jedi Order and the Force. That goes back to David Benioff and what's the other guy's name? DB Weiss, I think.
Yeah,
DB Weiss. I think it's Dan Weiss. But yeah, these guys who were doing the Game of Thrones show, they were supposed to be doing a trilogy of Star Wars movies. And the reports after the first script was submitted and Game of Thrones season 8 sucked and everything, and they got canned from Lucasfilm, the reports were that this was going to be something about the beginning of the Jedi Order. So over the past like 5 years, Lucasfilm has had an interest of doing a new take not on the Jedi, but like the beginning of everything in the Star Wars universe, the beginning of the Force, the beginning of the Jedi, maybe even the Sith. They've had that in mind, and they've also had James Mangold in mind as someone that want to come direct a Star Wars movie. And now they're getting both. They're killing two birds with one stone. So my initial reaction to this was pretty positive. Because like I said earlier, this is the most interesting concept for a Star Wars movie that I can think of at the moment that they have announced and what they have going on in the future. I'm more interested in this than I am the Rey movie, the Filoni movie, Sean Levi, Lando, Taika Waititi, any of them. This is the one that I think is the most risky to do and the most challenging. It's a new era, new characters, new concepts, new stories, so separate from everything else, and also the beginning of everything else. So I think it's a very bold move. It's risky, but I think this is the one that a lot of people will probably be more excited for because we don't have anything to really base it off of. We don't have, 3 shows building up to The Mandalorian or 3 movies building up to this Rey movie. It's new, it's fresh, and it's a breath of fresh air, in my opinion. So I'm very happy about this idea. I'm very excited about this movie. And when this was announced, this was the one that I was like, you know what? Good for you, Lucasfilm. But Lunga, take us back to April of this year, 2023. What was your initial reaction when they said James Mangold was going to do a new Jedi Order movie?
Hype. Lots of hype. Mangold, however we pronounce it. I think he's a great director to begin with. So when I heard he was doing this, I'm like, okay, well, this is a good start. But then again, we know what happens with directors in Star Wars. But I'm like, this is a good start. And then when I heard what it was, I'm like, okay, yeah, I am down for an origin of the Jedi. Think they're going to use that, by the way? You think they're going to call him the Jedi?
Jedi.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about later, like everything that he has specifically said, because we have gotten some hints on, I think, what to expect from this movie and stuff like that. He addresses the Jedi aspect of it. If he doesn't even know if we're going to use that word, if this is going to be like the first Jedi who doesn't know he's a Jedi.
Yeah. Well, they were called the Jedi.
Yeah, that was stupid. The J dash
Yeah.
DAI or something like that. Can't the EU wasn't all that good.
Right.
But okay, Palpamemes. How was your initial reaction to this back in the day?
Well, I mean, I love James Mangold as a director. Logan, Ford v Ferrari. I mean, there's a few other ones he's done and stuff too. We talked about the Boba Fett movie that he was supposed to do. Was it last week? And I was still on board. I think he could have made that something cool at the very least. After seeing Logan and especially Ford v Ferrari, I think his style would be unique, but also fitting with Star Wars and Origins, a Dawn of the Jedi tale, story, movie, trilogy, whatever it's going to be. It's something that I've wanted for a very, very long time. That said, it's a very sensitive topic, and that's something I'm sure we'll get into later. If they don't do the Origins of the Jedi right, that would leave a permanent scar on the franchise, and it would be very difficult to come back from that. And that's why I think James Mangold would be a great director for that role. Did they say he's going to be writing it? Any involvement with the writing, or is it just he's the director?
No,
Is
yeah,
that it so far?
he's a writer and director, according to
Well,
some of the leaks, or not leaks, I guess, scoop reports from people like Jason Ward at Making Star Wars and Festival
yeah.
Bulletin.
So right now,
He,
let's say they are. I mean, he's a good writer from the things I've seen that he has written and had more control over. I did think if you look at Logan, which is it's what Last Jedi tried to do, which is a broken man becoming a hero again.
Mhm.
James Mangold would have done Last Jedi way better than Rian Johnson had he still had to do that same outline for the film. But I'm excited for this. It's a story I've wanted to see. It's got a lot of potential, and I hope it's the start of leading into, say, Old Republic, right? Or leading into these new eras that are way, way, way far back. I think that they're not even going to have lightsabers in this movie. I think they'll use, what was it, vibroblades and Legends at first, and then at the very end of the movie, they build the first proto saber.
And then how about the backpacks with the
the proto saber,
hose?
exactly that. Yeah. So I think
there's some things we don't need to repeat. I promise.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, proto sabers are dope.
No,
you don't like the
They
proto?
were fine.
Oh,
they were fine, but they were not inspired. I will say that.
Yeah. Excited, but my final thought: this movie is not going to happen. I'll put money on it.
Wow.
Really? You don't think it's going to happen?
Okay, let me rephrase it. This movie is not going to happen with Mangold, and I can give my reasons why if you want.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's an interesting point.
It's funny
I
because
highly disagree.
Lucasfilm hasn't made a profit in many, many years. The last movie they did make lost them hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. Disney comes in, and we're telling Disney we're hiring this man for the Star Wars movie. Star Wars is a very sensitive topic. Disney goes to their main shareholders, Nelson and all them. They say, Mangold's doing this movie. They look at his track record. They say, well, this man lost them hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you really, really think Disney is going to greenlight that? Do you really think they're going to push through with that?
Well, they wouldn't announce it at Celebration if it wasn't already greenlit.
No, that's not true. Bob Iger's already talked about that. He said that that's all Lucasfilm, and then he said they'll announce things that haven't been greenlit yet by Disney, or even like okayed to be funded. He said it. I don't think it was after.
That doesn't make sense though, because they have not announced an Ahsoka season 2 because they have said that it's not greenlit by Disney. So that seems kind of like a differing approaches and stuff like that. And
well, they're not the most consistent company, are they?
Yeah, I get that, but still, it's like it is all underneath the Disney banner, and also like Kathleen Kennedy said, one of the reasons they did so many announcements was because of pressure from Disney. So
yes,
it doesn't
absolutely.
it doesn't make sense for Disney to be like, hey, you guys need to announce more stuff, but don't announce things we haven't greenlit yet. Well, it's like, well,
no, they're not telling them not to announce them. They're just saying, hey, these things haven't been greenlit. They haven't been approved, essentially.
Well, but even in the report of last month about Dave Filoni becoming the COO, Lucasfilm officials told, I think it was Variety or the Hollywood Reporter, that all 3 projects that were announced in Celebration of this past year are still in the works. And there's been other reports saying that like this is, and even reports from Mangold himself have said that, hey, like here's James Mangold's current slate right now. He was supposed to begin filming on a Bob Dylan film back in this fall. Clearly, the strikes happened, so that's going to happen this next year. So he's going to be gone, yes, for another year or two. He has to direct and write the Swamp Thing for DC, and he has to direct and write the Dawn of the Jedi movie for Lucasfilm. According to all the reports, and from credible inside scoopers like Jeff Snyder and Bestman Bulletin, people like that are saying after he does this Bob Dylan film, his full focus is going to be on Star Wars. Now, yes, a lot can change between
how
here
long.
and then.
I mean, okay, Taika Waititi's film is still happening. Taika Waititi's film is still going to happen.
Yeah, but he's actively
That's
talking
going to make
about
a lot of people mad, according to Taika.
Well, yeah.
Listen,
that kind of stuff is stupid. But James Mangold is a professional in the industry, whereas Taika Waititi was a new face for a little bit. If they're gonna, it would make no sense for Disney to look at Charmin Obad-Chinoy and be like, yes, this lady who has relatively no experience compared to like James Mangold. She's very new. She should direct the next Star Wars movie that's going to release, but we're not confident in a James Mangold, who, yes, he directed Indiana Jones, but it did not do well in the box office. But that's not a reflection on James Mangold. That's not a reflection on him at all or his work. So it makes no sense to me why they would just cancel it because of him, or that they're not.
Well, I think it'll be.
Well, I mean, look what happened to Patty Jenkins, right? I mean,
that
was a big name.
She had one movie that didn't.
But Patty Jenkins was a big movie for a small time. It was Wonder Woman, and then after that,
right? She was a trend, sure.
Yes, and Lucasfilm, and this is going to sound screwed up, but they needed to do a first female director, and that movie did seem like one of those things of Disney pressuring them to put something. That movie was supposed to come out this month. This month we were supposed to be talking about Rogue
2
Squadron.
weeks, I think, from now.
Yeah,
about 2 weeks.
Yeah, so things do change, but I don't, out of everyone that is doing a Star Wars movie and all that stuff, the fact that last month they still said that his movie is in the works. Lucasfilm has been trying to work and has been working with Mangold for many years. He's already worked with Kathleen Kennedy, and he's the one who pitched it to her, and she agreed to it. I don't see in any circumstance why Disney would get involved with this and say, no, this movie's not happening.
I understand, and you bring up a lot of good points. It's also, this movie is many, many, many years away. So it, like you said, anything can change given that. I think again,
let's be honest, Palvin. When they don't happen, it's not because of Disney, right? It comes down to those, two deadly words that everyone hates that we've heard far too often.
Creative
differences. The name that you don't say.
Creative differences.
I thought you were going to say Kathleen Kennedy.
No. Creative differences. And Mangold being the kind of director he is, if it doesn't happen, I could see it happening because of that. Not because of a Disney's not
executive corporate.
It's Mangold,
shareholder.
Man. I mean, let's be honest. Disney's not gonna say, yeah, no, we don't want. I mean, unless he gets caught up in a Harvey Weinstein situation, I don't think that's gonna happen.
What is he, Jonathan Majors? Did he be his fucking assistant?
Yeah, exactly.
Or something like that?
Well, I mean, fine. We'll see. I think more than likely creative differences are going to happen more than just shareholders saying, "Oh, we really, really do not support this." And you bring up good points only.
Well, let's get into some of what James Mangold has said in the past about this movie. Well, the first thing he said was immediately to Vanity Fair right after the announcement at Star Wars Celebration. He said, "It's a chance to tell the entire story of its own, the birth of the Force." Mangold told Variety after the panel, "When I first talked to Kathleen Kennedy about it, I just said, I just see this opening to make a kind of Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments about the birth of the Force. The Force has become a kind of religious legend that spans through all these movies. But where did it come from? How is it found? Who found it? Who was the first Jedi? And that's what I'm writing right now." Now, this was in April of this year. So when he says writing, it sounds like he's at least trying to get the outline and the story treatment of this done. We have the strikes and everything like that happened. But, I like everything that he's saying right there about what is interesting about this movie and what the plan is. He does go on the Happy, Sad, and Confused podcast back in June. And he said, when I talked to some of the Star Wars clerks that keep track of all these timelines, I was like, so when would this happen? And they were like, 25,000 years before episode 1. And I was like, oh, I was looking for some distance, but that's distance. I'll do it. I might find Charlton Heston, in an abandoned subway station, but I'll do it. The reality for me is that feeling of space, no pun intended, was something that I felt was really important, not to get away from fan service or the intricacies of what George had set up and dreamed of, but just to have the space to tell a story and not be instantly encumbered with the bases that you have to hit, which honestly, there's no way to explain to folks other than to say that it's like a game we played as kids. Twister, at a certain point, you're in a triangle because you're just trying to find ways to tell a story with so many constraints that you can. He did go on this talk about how he wants to make it like kind of like a spaghetti western kind of thing, and a little different than some of the other Star Wars films. When he's talking about like the Jedi stuff that Lunga was talking about earlier, he said, I don't want to make any guarantees one way or another, but it will be before Jedi, meaning you might be experiencing something that might become Jedi, despite the fact that people make movies other ways. I don't tend to think people brand themselves before they've actually found themselves, so you don't come up with a name for your organization before you understand what it is. So when you guys hear that, when you hear about how he's talking about this movie and the time and the space that he has from the Skywalker Saga, what does that tell you about his approach to this film? Do you think he's going to try to do the typical thing of playing it safe and making it feel like the Star Wars of old, or do you think this means he's really trying to create something new and different?
I really think it's going to be very mystical. I think it's going to feel more like a fantasy movie than a sci-fi movie. I think it's going to be very mystical. I think it's going to be very maybe going back to the roots of Star Wars from Lucas. That it's going to be a very kind of monks situation. Where you have these kind of faithful people for different reasons out there, and more delving into the Force and what the Force means and how they come to the realization of this power. I think that's what's be like we kind of touched earlier about the lightsaber thing. There's not going to be any lightsabers. Palpatine's mentioned in the lore. Yeah, vibra braids have been around for a very long time. Those are just weapons. It's not like only early Jedi had them. They were just around. So I have a feeling it's gonna be something like that. It's gonna be a very mystical kind of deal and feel more like more on the fantasy side of Star Wars than the sci-fi side.
Go ahead,
Well,
Palpatine.
Yeah, my initial reaction, reading that, hearing that, whatever, it seems like he genuinely cares about this story. It seems like he has a lot of ideas within him for how this story could play out. My biggest question, and he brings it up a little bit, is, in my opinion, my preference would be Force users are around in this time period, because I don't think it's something. It'd be difficult to say who's the first person to start using the Force. Then you bring up another question. Well, why did that person get it? Why did the Force decide now? Okay, now you can use the Force. Or is using the Force an act of imbalance of the Force? They can bring up questions like that. And so I don't know if I mean, I don't want to say I would dislike it, but reading it now, I would prefer there be Force users, and at some point, Darkseid gets corrupted into the Force, and that causes the Jedi to actually form. But hearing all that, he definitely has ideas. I would hope he would consult with George Lucas a lot, and I'm sure they have the ability to do that. I think that would definitely come in with some good ideas. And also, if they publicly come out and say, yeah, he worked with George on the main ideas for this movie, I think that would ease a lot of people's worry. And so it'd be a very good
create a
PR
lot of
move.
goodwill.
It would be a very. I mean, look at Dave Filoni, how many brownie points he gets for doing nothing, just because people are like, oh, he knows George, so he calls George for 5 hours a day on everything. It's like, it's free PR. I mean, and so hearing the way he talks about it it's so refreshing, because when I got to be careful here. When Charmaine talked about her doing the new Jedi Order film after Celebration happened, her initial reaction was talking about 9/11. Right, and the cultural impact of that, right, and the war in Iraq and all that, okay? Not a single ounce was talked about the damn movie and what her plans and ideas and how excited she is for it. Just about this culture aspect, okay? Then we get Rian Johnson when he's talking about, oh, the fans are this, the fans are blah, 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 your Snoke theory sucks. And now we get Taika Waititi saying, oh, yeah, they'll probably hate the movie, all right? So it is very refreshing to hear a director really actually be very sophisticated in how he's talking about this, this very precious franchise, And as phenomenal of a director and writer as he is, if this film happens the way his ideas are, and it's not meddled with too much, I would be very, very excited for that.
Well, and it's interesting you do bring up George Lucas, because he did say that he hasn't spoken to him yet, but he wants to talk to George. Because I agree. I think getting some advice from George, I mean, oh God, I would kill if they would even let George help like co-write the story. I know that's a little much to ask for from George, but that would really elevate my excitement for this, because we get a hint of what the past is in George's mind and how all of this started and everything like that. So,
and it would still just be a PR move. Like, well, George consulted with this story. Yeah,
I mean, well, hold on. Listen,
I wouldn't say it's
from the aspects of the boardroom. Definitely, it's a PR move. Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
If Mangold says, "I want to work with George," they're chomping at a bit. Oh, we're using this, but that's not Mangold's reason, right? I mean, he got
no. I'm not saying. I'm saying creative. An end result of that would also include very good PR.
Well, of course,
right?
Of course,
right.
Yeah.
First and foremost, he's consulting with the man who created the story in the first place, right? That's an amazing idea. That's an amazing move, and I hope he goes through with that.
So, do you guys quick on this? Do you want him to work with George Lucas with this, or do you think that would be not really worth the time and the attention that we would give it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, he's been on the sets of The Mandalorian and stuff. He's I know he's not really doing anything, other than just giving input here and there. But it's not like he's officially was doing anything like that. But yeah, 100%. As long as George keeps his ego in check and realizes that it's not you're making this movie, George. It's Mangold's movie. You're still there, not just to help
that's where
out.
the worries come in. Is how much will George be allowed to come in? Will it cause issues between him? And then he's like, what, screw you guys, I'm never coming back.
I could so see George on set or in the writer's room with James Mangold being like, well, when I made Star Wars in '77 and I thought about the past then, it really came from the Gungas. The Gungas were the first to use the Force, and that's where Jar Jar was inspired from and all that. Like, it would be. I mean, quite literally, when it came to Richard Marquand and directing Return of the Jedi, he said, doing it with George around, he said it's like directing King Lear with Shakespeare in the room. So he does have an overwhelming presence in these kinds of situations.
Let me ask you guys this. Do you think he'll try and bring the Wills in the story? I mean, because that's that's a part of the story.
I would love that,
whether we like it or not. I think
that's touching on the whole. I said the monks and the mysticism part. That's what I
honestly think you might need it, because if you're going to touch on the start of Force users,
Lucasfilm's never really done anything with that.
Well,
if you look at the past, they haven't done much. Even with the new sequel movies and everything. What did they really do to expand?
The most you got was
Force
a Force dyad, and it's technically an expansion on the Force itself, but not even the Force itself. It's just a ability the Force can have to two users, right? And it's so rare.
With that, it kind of, this is where I get annoyed with Disney. Where when they did the Force dyad, then they kind of, I'm not going to say rewrote canon, but they made canon that, the Rule 2 was actually just an imitation of the Force dyad. And it's like, oh, okay, fucking great. So this is now.
No, it was more.
That wasn't officially. Wasn't that?
No,
I have Daniel.
That was in a Book of Sis thing. And that
I've got it over there.
He literally says, Palpatine says, it is said to be a mere imitation of the Force. It's stuff like that where it gets a little.
But I interpreted that as part of the Force dyad. I'm sorry, part of the Rule 2 was they were wanting to try and recreate the Force dyad because of the potential power it would unlock. Not the Rule of 2 was created for a Force dyad. That's how I
also got to remember. Technically, it was around before the sequels. Okay, I know you hate Space Jesus only, but Revan and Bastila, I mean, that was technically the first dyad that was around, and that was around way before.
Yeah, but I think its problem isn't a Force dyad.
Stuff like that is fine, though. It's just with the sequels, it was like, what's new in the Force? What they did was add the first, or what they call the Prime Jedi, the first temple that Luke was at, and that is probably going to tie into this movie, of course. And then they also did the Force projection thing, which, do we that and healing? I mean, it was stuff that was just kind of like,
Well, there was no
okay.
conceptual idea of the Force that was expanded upon. It was just what can the Force do, and I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
problem.
Well, and that's why I think this is such an interesting concept of a movie of who is the first Jedi? What Force abilities do they have? How did they discover the Force? What is
Well,
What
and
if
that,
like
it's
that's
the
a
wills and
I
how
want
that
to
comes in? Like,
contextualize this because Pelpamies was
Mhm.
talking about how it's like, well, of course there's going to be the Force. There's not going to be a first person user. No, we that's not what it is. But what I feel is going to be like if we talk about the wills. If it is the wills, it could very well not be. But let's just say it's something like the wills. Okay, I think it's going to be kind of like how these Tibetan monks who know of these powers of ki and you know just kind of do things, and it's just kind of this practice that they do within themselves as a form of discipline, right?
Mhm.
It's not something that they go out into the world with. It's not something that they go out into the universe with, as far as Star Wars goes. It's something that they do for enlightenment for themselves. You know what I mean? And certain people are taught it if they come in. When we talk about the first Jedi and the first person to use the Force, I think it's more in that altruistic, going to help people, doing something for the universe, for the galaxy, whatever, you know, however you look at it. I think that's what we're talking about when we say the first Jedi and the first Force is the first person who uses it as what we know of as Jedi, right? That's what we're looking at here. Not necessarily that it's like the fire, right? Like the caveman with the fire, like there was no Force.
Well,
It's
that's
like,
why I want to
oh, you know, and
bring
then,
up
you know,
like what if it does start off with, because the Jedi are actually needed, because it starts off with not Sith, but the dark side corrupts the Force, and now there's dark side users. Well, now the Jedi, I keep saying Jedi like they're here at the time, but the what will soon to be Jedi are like, oh, we need to take care of this because, as you can say, they're like monks. They know about the Force. They understand the balance, right? And so they
right.
realize
And it is
it's out
always
of
going to be new to
balance.
someone, right? I'm sure we're going to have some
Sure.
character that's on his own and he's going to suddenly force push something and he's going to
What
be
if this
you know,
what if this
and
is a Yoda species?
I don't think they're
That
going
would be
there.
that'd be interesting, but it's a little too
It's
much
a
right
little on the
now.
nose.
Like that
A little
was
on the
if
nose.
that was the yeah, if that was the first Jedi, that'd be a little weird. But I think when we think of the first Jedi, how do you guys want to approach that in a movie like this that's starting everything? Do you think it should be someone who's kind of like a side character? Like let's say how we kind of approached Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in the original trilogy. The main character was Luke Skywalker, and yes, he became a Jedi. But we, like Luke, we the audience members, were kind of exploring this new world and the religion of the Force and the Jedi and all that stuff. And then you see actual Jedi like Darth Vader and Obi-Wan going at it and everything. Would you like that idea with this movie where the first Jedi isn't the main character, but there is a main character who's discovering everything with this person who becomes the first Jedi?
I what, so like the Han Solo type character, the Finn type character, or
Yeah,
something.
something that feels a little bit more grounded because I do have a fear of
Yeah, he's
like,
gonna have
isn't
a
this
buddy.
person?
He or she's gonna have a
Yeah,
buddy. Definitely, they're gonna
there
have a
has to
buddy
be
or a
a couple
sister or a
people to go on an
sibling or
adventure
something.
with, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's gonna be something
Oh,
like
I
that.
would love
But
it.
it
I
could
would
also,
love it if it was two brothers and like one of them goes towards the light side and goes to the dark. You
Well,
keep
what
the
if
I
it's
mean,
family
almost
stuff
it's
in
I
there.
almost
don't.
like
Yeah,
a
but again, this is what I think. I'm seeing Doctor Strange because you know the way the Doctor Strange movie was. I see this person finding out they have powers, not knowing what to make of it, hearing of this temple where this religious sect, the Wills, are at, and he travels there like Strange traveling to Kamartaj to try to find out what these abilities are and how he can control them. He learns from them, and his teacher is dabbling on sides of it that they're forbidden to use, which is the dark side, and that's going to become the antagonist.
what if it's almost
You
like
know,
a Adam and Eve story, kind of real biblical, because the Force is very, very heavily, conceptualized on a lot of religious texts and stories and
Yeah.
stuff. And I think you can do something where one goes to the light, one goes to the dark, but not even that, but more the moment one person went to the dark side. He opened up to the dark side. He found it. He or she, could be a white brunette British woman for all we know. Um, you know, I think that could be. I think you can really do something cool with that. And it would
Yeah,
still
it's
fit
gonna
with
be
the themes.
Ray's great grandmother.
It all
When we
leads
find out
back
that
to
you
Palpatine.
see, Ray still somehow was not only just the savior, but she was the origin. Her family
She was
on her
also the
mother's
first
side
Jedi.
is the originator of the
The Jedi
of
are
the
all
Jedi.
the same people. Turns out Ray's great grandmother her name was Mary. Mary Sue Skywalker.
Wow.
And it's going to be great. And it's coming into theaters near you.
It's going to be great.
When we think about this, though, because we talk about the origin of the Jedi, the origin of the Force, and what we can expect from this. We've talked about the wills and everything like that. Do you think it's a good idea to cover the origin of the Force, how the Force was maybe discovered, or maybe like Palpatine was saying that there's a good amount of people who have the Force, but maybe they don't really know how to use it or what it is. It's just kind of something that some people feel, but not everybody. Or like Lungo was saying, of maybe there's only like a couple monks who don't even have a name for it, but they just know that this is true. This is in nature. This is in life. You know, these guys are one with the Force in a way, kind of like Truett, where he's like, I'm one with the Force is with me, and all that stuff. People like that. What do you guys want from the origins of the Force? Because this can go either just okay, really good, or it could be a disaster. And a lot of people see it as, oh, they're ruining the Force, they're ruining canon.
There's not much canon on the origins of it. I mean, there's some, and it's scattered across many books, and none of them coincide with each other. There's a lot of conflicting. The EU, again, there's so much great stuff that came out of it, but there's so much garbage that came out of it.
Well,
So
but it's a hard subject to touch, is it not?
No. The hard subjects to touch is the ones they already fucked up. Okay? The hard subjects to touch is the canon, right? The original trilogy. That's the shit that you were not supposed to fuck up of everything. Okay? Because let's be honest. Let's say they made a sequel trilogy that people loved. It stuck to the original trilogy. They made Luke great. Everything was great. And then after that, they started taking some stuff from the EU and fucked it all up. People would be upset. But if we had a good sequel trilogy, they would be like, okay, that was a miss. You know what I mean? That's where we'd be at. Okay?
Yeah.
So I don't think this is hallowed ground. Okay? The only hallowed ground I see outside the original trilogy right now at this point is Revan, Knights of the Old Republic, right? I think that's and perhaps Bane. Those are the two hallowed ground that's left. The origins, it's so vague, it's so scattered, the different books conflict with each other. None tells an actual cohesive story. So it's up to interpretation for anyone to write what they want with it. You know what I mean? So I don't think that. Now, you're gonna have people who love a particular book and say, if it's not that, I hate it. You're gonna have people who just hate it because it's Disney doing it, and now they're gonna tell us how this whole started, and they're gonna hate it because Disney's the one telling us how this all started. I mean, is there any way around that? The only way around it is make a good fucking movie. Just make a good movie.
That's true, but it's very risky business, I feel, because when it comes to something mystical, this is the argument that Goldman makes a lot of. Sometimes there's good things to be left as a mystery. Do you really need to know where Yoda species come from?
Well,
do you really need to know what they're called, the origin of that? And that could be the question with the Force of, like, for me, I get obsessed with the mythological stuff. When it comes to Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, I'm like, are the gods real in Game of Thrones? Is the drowned god a real thing? And what does all these prophecies mean? Where do the White Walkers come from? Lord of the Rings, it's a Morgoth and Melkor and Sauron and Iluvatar and stuff. When it comes to the Star Wars, it's like, okay, where did the ones come from? The father, the son, the daughter. Where did the Force come from? Where are the wills? What is this stuff? This movie seems like it's going to be the only thing that really kind of tackles that mythological aspect of the Force, and that's really powerful. But you make one wrong step, you say that midichlorians are the only ways you can get the Force, you ruin a lot of that mythicism to a lot of people. So I feel like there's a great fine line he has to walk here.
I want to give my thoughts on this. Here's how I think you do it. I think you do it based off of how religious texts were written. Right? Let's just take the Bible because that's the one I'm most familiar with. It's like 30 chapters, 30 different books written over the span of, I think, like 3,000 years. Yet they all somewhat correlate with each other, right? And I think you can do something like that where it is these monks, then they make it clear here's what we understand the Force to be and where it came from. That way, it's simple. Well, that's what they think it is, right? That's what they think based on the knowledge and information they have at hand. That doesn't mean that's 100% factually the way it is.
And the Sith have their own origin story where
the
it came
Sith
from.
have their own thing that, oh no, you need the Sith is balance is light and dark, right? Whereas the Jedi are like, no, balance is no dark. The origin of the Jedi, again, it's like the Bible's first chapter is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and in the first 7 days there's this, and that. That's a very, very loose chapter for a lot of shit that's going on. And I think you can do it something like that, where it's like, you don't need a detailed report on, crime report on how this happens step by step by step. And I think if it's just coming from these monks, like, this is what we know it to be. Perfect.
You can still tell.
If you don't like it, well, doesn't mean it's actually the way it is. It's how they believe it is.
Right. You can still tell an origin story without it being the origin story. Right.
And again, like you said, maybe
it's like the Joker, right? Joker has a dozen different origin stories, and which one's the real one?
But in the end, all leads to
the Batman. So you can have stuff like that, and like you said, this is what we know, this is what we believe. You know what I mean? And yeah, but that could be a telling. We don't know. So that's a good way. You still have the mystery, but you have an idea of, okay, well, this could be it.
Well, now, as an audience member, I could be like, I don't agree with that, but that's what they believe. You can't.
But it's still an interpretation.
They ruin the canon. Exactly.
Right. Even in their canon, it's an interpretation.
Yeah.
And to Only's point, he's like, you could be too much. And you brought up Lord of the Rings. I'm one of the very few people. I don't hate it. I do like reading stuff like that, but the Silmarillion is a history book. It is not a story. And people want a movie made out of it. People want a movie made out of it. I'm like, no. It is like the Bible if Tolkien wrote the Bible. It is so verbose. It is, again, I'm not Mr. Super Religious, but I do know something about this. And he brought up the Bible. I was Christian, so that's what I'll go with, Catholic. When you think about the Old Testament, when they say X begot X, and they give you like 10 pages of lineages of people and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that the Silmarillion was like. And it's like, God, no, please don't. I don't want anything like that in Star Wars. Don't do that. I don't want a Lord of the Rings. I don't want a Silmarillion movie. Just don't do that. You can make movies that talk about things from the Silmarillion, sure, but don't make a Silmarillion movie. But yeah, and I don't think Mangold's that dumb. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say, our egos are big enough to say that he's going to go with what we're talking about here, but they're very plausible ways that someone like Mangold can go. And I think that's what it's going to be. So I don't have much of a concern that it's going to be way out there.
Well, when it comes to like his approach and what we already know about the Star Wars canon and everything, what do you think he's going to use from what's already been like established? Because with Ahch-To being like, I guess the first Jedi temple, and that's where the Prime Jedi is, coming from. He has to do the story 25,000 years before Phantom Menace, because that's what's established in the canon of Star Wars of when like the Force first started coming up. We also have the Wills, the creatures or entity that Yoda met in Clone Wars Season 6, where he became one with the Force. And then you have the Ones, the Mortis gods. What out of all of this, what parts of the Star Wars canon that we know is in the foundation of Star Wars, it cannot be changed, this is history. If we had a Silmarillion, these things would be in it as a historical record. What from the Star Wars canon do you expect James Mangold to use in his film, if anything at all?
At this point, I think we're going to Tython. That was already in the lore, and then they brought it back in Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So I think something like Tython. Ahch-To.
I think Ahch-To is going to be a big one. I really think that's going to be like a planet that they end up going to or something to start. Because you talk about the monks.
I mean, if you think about Star Wars, when we think about all the movies, when you think about Mandalorian, these shows and movies are made of planet hopping. It literally is boom, 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 boom. I mean, very rarely, unless we're watching Kenobi, do we have, and even that, he went to another place. He went to more than one planet. Very rarely do we see is at least 2 planets, if not more, in anything Star Wars. So they're gonna bounce around.
Well, are they? I mean, where's the technology at the state of the galaxy? Do they have hyperspace jumping?
Who said? Yeah, why wouldn't they? Hyperspace been around for quite a bit.
No,
and you don't, and you don't.
Yeah, there's
remember
a time before it.
Yeah,
maybe.
there was.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
they did
it's
have
something that could change.
They did have like more primitive ways of space shuttle. I don't think we're going to reach a time. We're going so far back that there was no space shuttle. It's like
you think that it is kind of a core part of Star Wars that's going to be very hard not to have.
I mean,
yeah,
it's called Star Wars.
But if the technology looks the exact same as it does in like the prequel trilogy and stuff, I'm gonna be like, what the heck's going on here? Maybe hyperspace is just not as efficient as it is by the time the speed of things and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I think the galaxy will be less explored. They won't have gone as far, perhaps.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there probably is no hollow net or anything like that,
Right.
Yeah, but we've already gotten like hints of stuff like this in like the High Republic, where even like all the hyperspace lanes aren't like perfected, and that's still a common thing by like modern, I guess, course of Star Wars, where like they can't go to the unknown regions and shit like that. But honestly, like for me, I would love to see something, of course, involving like the Mortis gods and just some of the kind of like legend stuff and history stuff that they've always teased at, like the Rakatan Empire. Like when you think about villains for this movie or this time, it could be the Sith and it could be the dawn of them and everything, but it's more interesting as an origin story for the Sith as well. Like, oh, they were doing they were part of the Jedi Order for a little bit and they split off and created the dark side of the Force in a way and did the Sith stuff. But if we're before that time where we're really dealing with the dark side, like by the Sith, I think it would be interesting if like the villains of this were an ancient civilization who does use the Force, but for bad, like the Rakatan Empire, which is canon already as well.
Yeah, the Rakatan Empire is very interesting, and it's very and they brought it up in Andor, right? So I mean, they're already touching at these things. But this Mangold movie, as far as we know, is a one-off, right? They're not talking trilogy here or anything. As far as
no, it sounds like just a one-time film,
right? I think this could be a starting point, a jumping off point to get into that. Something like the Rakatan Empire, I think, requires a trilogy. That's not just something you throw in one movie. You know what I mean? You're gonna have this either them at their height or power, and in one movie they get defeated, or you can't have them rise and fall in the same movie. It's a little too much for one movie. But to your point, this movie could definitely be a jumping off point to that. That's how
because they don't even have to defeat the Rakatan Empire in this movie. Like it could just be them already ruling thing, and then the Jedi Order has started, and at the end of the movie they're like, hey, like now we have an opportunity to defeat this evil shit right here.
We kind of talked about this situation with the Rey movie episode, where it's like, oh, there's got to be a galactic threat, and I don't think this movie is going to be that kind of thing. It's going to be probably a threat on a planet, there's going to be traveling to other places perhaps for reasons, but I think the threat is mostly to a planet, a people kind of deal.
Yeah, I think this movie's more, out of all of them, should be the most like adventurous, exploring mythicism, fantasy aspect of exploration and finding your destiny or purpose in life. Like, I don't think this one has to be, oh, the fate of the galaxy is at stake and we need the Jedi to start up to defeat them and all that stuff. That's just too much. I think at some point you have to be a little contained and tell a simple
Dune.
story, and this is complex enough,
Yeah, think Dune, because in the first Dune movie, I mean, then it spreads out to a whole galaxy, but it was all on Arrakis, the battle. It was all about the Fremen. It was all about everything happening on Dune, and that's where this genesis of this whole empire happened in Dune started. So, if we're talking about the origins of the Jedi, I think confined. Most of the stories can be kind of confined to one planet, or where major events are happening on one planet. And I think what happens there is what sparks the creation of the Jedi.
Perhaps a lot of Force users get wiped out on this planet, and that leads the remaining to go to Octu and start up. They say, okay, we need to actually build this, one way or the other. I think that could be interesting. The end, they go to Octu, and then there you go. The rest is history.
Well, Palmim, since you're a Last Jedi or sequel lover, what do we know about the Prime Jedi? The one that we saw in the Last Jedi, like all the crap on like art on the floor, the ancient Jedi texts, those books and everything that movie introduced.
Let me make it clear. I'm not a Last Jedi lover.
Okay, you
I
can't
would.
backtrack now. 2018 happened. It was real. You were on the wrong
It
side
was
of
real.
history.
The,
If he was a lover, we know what he's a lover of.
I went through
While
a
the Last
character arc,
Jedi
all right?
is the
And-
Last Jedi is the most divisive movie. Rise of
Mm.
Skywalker is most likely the most hated. So let's because of
anyways,
I mean,
we need to get my opinions up to date.
What do we know
I've
about the
changed.
Prime Jedi? What do we know about this stuff?
Basically nothing, from my understanding of it. Yeah, I mean, from my understanding of it, we know basically nothing. It appears that based on the Jedi texts, there was a lot of hidden power and knowledge of the Force that was hidden away throughout the years. So you can say they would have been more powerful back in the day. I think that's a possibility, especially if there's a minute number of Jedi around. But to my understanding, unless it's some book I haven't read, I don't. We know almost nothing about it.
All right,
Like, even in the Last Jedi novel-
I pulled him up on the Wikipedia thing because I think some of the sources are like all the behind the scenes stuff for the Last Jedi and like the book around it, and it says the Prime Jedi was an individual who became the first Jedi to ever use the Force. The Prime Jedi was also the founder of the Jedi Order. The Prime Jedi established the Order on the planet Ahch-To around 25,025 BBY. I'm not saying 25,000 twice. I'm saying 25,025 BBY. The first Jedi Temple, which is located on Ahch-To, contained a mosaic of the Prime Jedi statue, meditation and balance during the High Republic era. The meditation chamber located on the space station Starlink Beacon also featured a mosaic of the Prime Jedi.
that's it right there. There's the plot.
I was
And
about to
it's
say
pretty
that
much
really that like can you change any? Did we literally just discover the plot of this entire movie right here?
I
Because-
mean,
Well, they did do that.
But we
when they were
kinda
trying to do
talked
the
about it,
Danny
right?
Elfman Wise movie. So I mean,
we already
repeat
kind
what
of
you said.
hinted around all that. Like the prime, let's be like the Prime Jedi. That's a name that was given to this person by them, right? It's not
to this
he called
character
himself.
that we're going to explore probably.
Right. He or she has a name. It's not the Prime Jedi. That's just what they called it. Like Pelham's kind of hit on it too. He said, that they could destroy all this stuff, and I don't think it's going to start on Ahch-To. If anything, it's going to end on Ahch-To. The events that happen in this movie is going to lead to the foundation of Jedi Order on Ahch-To by this person who becomes the Prime Jedi.
which we know can't be many people because look at the size of the islands on there. I mean,
well, it's a very isolated place. They might have went there for a reason. Let's
that's
say
what I'm
on
saying.
this bigger
a lot of them
planet,
get wiped out.
they had the
Yeah.
wills. These people that were doing it, and they got so many wiped out that they left and went to this little tiny place where they can practice this in peace and grow it. You know what I mean?
Well, but even that planet though, that does go back to what Longa said at the beginning of like the monk aspect of it. That looks exactly like what you would expect in this kind of story and this kind of movie. And I think honestly, if he just, of course, Lucasfilm Story Group's going to tell him anything and everything that he needs to know, and they're going to tell him about the Prime Jedi. But I think just giving him that foundation of just saying like, here's what we've already established, and this is where it kind of all starts. It's enough of a plot to work with and turn into a really good story, but it's also so vague that he really can make any story that he wants of this. Like when it says the Prime Jedi was an individual who became the first Jedi to ever use the Force, it's not specific if it was a man, if it was a woman. It was also the founder of the Jedi Order. It doesn't say how he found it. It just said it was on the planet Ahch-To around this time. It just says around too, 25,025 BBY, in about the first temple. So all it says about this person is that it's just the first everything. And it's so vague enough that you really can do whatever you want with that in terms of the story and how they discover the Force. But our question earlier of like, oh, does everyone else use the Force? What's that like and everything? This says he is the first Jedi to ever use the Force. So maybe there's other people who use it, but this is the first person who identifies as a Jedi to start.
Exactly.
So,
the first Jedi to use the Force.
So I think it's I think with that alone, that context and that canon that we have already is interesting enough that I really do feel like this movie should be made, and I think this is a really good idea. The last thing I guess on this aspect of it is, do you want, because we've done this with Balin Skull and we kind of had a little touch of the Mortis gods and the ones. they've been around for a very long time. Probably maybe before 25,000 years. Maybe they were there after the 25,000 years. But do you guys think anything like that, anything like the Ones or Abeloth or even the Wills, those supernatural celestial shit that's like really, really nerdy, but also like also really interesting. Do you think any of that should be mentioned in this movie, or is that too much for a movie like this that's about the origin of everything? Don't everybody speak at once.
I don't think. I mean, I think they can do it as a loose term, as a loose interpretation of what they are, right? Because once you start getting in the nitty gritty and all these confined details and stuff, you kind of you put yourself in a corner sometimes, especially when these, like you said, very very nerdy stuff that are kind of out there. And so I don't know if you want to really go too detailed with them, you know. So same thing with what I said about the origins of the Force itself. It needs to be up for interpretation from these characters in the story based on what they know, not what it actually is. I don't think we should even see them. Perhaps you see statues of them and stuff, or whatever. Or maybe some of these monks have visions, right? So I think I can do it that way.
Honestly, I don't even know if I really want the origin of the Force though, because to me that's just something like life. Like it always is.
Well, yeah, but here on Life we have our own interpretations on what was the origin of life, right?
Yeah.
Some believe it was this, some believe it was God, some believe it was blah blah blah. I see no problem doing it that way. I think as long as it's made clear this is what they believe, right? I think that'd be cool. Could set up a new kind of set up a culture aspect for it.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't think we're gonna get into the nuts and bolts of the origin,
the nitty gritty, the Force and the birth.
I don't think that's. I don't think that's.
I mean, and it's not even.
There's gonna be legends. There's gonna be people like we've already mentioned. People
exactly.
Stories
this guy
talking,
was doing a trip and he had this vision, So
right.
I promise I have seen the Force on my shroom trips and my DMT trips. They are very real. Been a long time since I've gone down that path, but I remember. I remember very well. So I think the last thing about like the actual movie itself and what we think about the movie and can expect from it is the fan expectations. What do you think are the fan expectations from this movie? Not from us, and what we expect from James Mangold and his story. No, but I'm saying like we're a different kind of fans.
Are you talking casuals? Or who are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about like the people that are going to be here, Dave. The people that are already factored in. That the second this movie was announced, but not even the hardcore, because just most Star Wars fans in general, casual or not, are going to go see this movie. Yeah, but still, let's say this movie, you announce a Star Wars movie, you automatically are going to make $500 million in the box office, and let's say that's equal to I don't know how many people in the fucking world that's going to be, but let's say it's like 5 million people already. The second you announce it, they're going to be there. What do you think their expectations for this movie is? Because it's different now. This isn't the Rey movie where, I expect Rey to be doing this with the Jedi Order, that and the other. And then when it comes to the Filoni movie, I expect them to bring in Thrawn and everything like that. This is uncharted territory. What do you think is the fan expectations for the entire fandom and even the casual audiences looking at this kind of movie right here? What do they want? What do they need from a movie like this to like it?
I tire of trying to predict what the most dysfunctional fan group in the universe wants, because I don't fucking know. There's so many sects of the fandom. There's so many niches of it that no one can ever agree on anything, and at this point, if you want to put the rank and file, they just want a good movie. I think that is literally, we are that low of expectations. We're just like, just give me a good movie.
I would argue decent. That's all. Just decent, please.
Yeah. I really like the way you put that too, Lunga, about like, I think like the standards of Star Wars fans have continued to drop ever since the prequels, where like even when it comes to like bad dialogue, I've seen people say like, Oh, well, that's always been a thing. It's like, okay, so if it's bad then, is it suddenly good now? Like it just you can't keep repeating bad things. And I do think a lot of people when it feels like when it comes to the diehard people, the people who no matter what you release, like us with even Bad Batch, we may or may not watch it, but that's not meant for the mass consumption of all the people in the world. That's meant for the diehard Star Wars fans, keep them busy. I do feel like there is this sentiment of like we're just happy with anything that's titled Star Wars, and if it's bad, it's not so bad because it's Star Wars. You know, like they try to find good thing goals. in the
There's a
pieces of
section
script.
of group, the whole shills. I don't like that term, but if you were to put a label on these people, yeah, if it's Star Wars, it's got to be good, right? I love everything Star Wars. I think the hardest job that this movie is going to have to do is not satisfy the casual audience, but to get them invested, right? So maybe there has to be lightsabers in it. I mean, I'm not saying it should go that route. I'm saying what are they going to do that will bring casual audience members investment in?
Easy. If this is where marketing comes in, right? Because what brings the casual audiences is marketing. Okay, let's not make any bones about it. What brings the casual audiences is marketing. Oh, what movies are coming out? Ooh, look at this trailer. Ooh, look at this, and it catches your eye. And everyone, casual audiences know the Force. The basic level, they know the Force. If you surround this around the lore of the Force, if you surround us about, how did the Jedi start using it? How did a Jedi become the Jedi? And you really give it this very oldie, biblical kind of feel. You know what I mean? In the marketing, people are a sucker for origins, right? How did this all start?
Oh
How
yeah,
did
yeah.
they're a sucker for that shit. Casual audience,
Especially for something
okay?
like Star Wars, as powerful as the Force. Like
Yeah,
you go anywhere in the world and mention the Force, so like oh Star Wars. You talk about the origin of it. That alone is very interesting. So I do think the
right. Even if you
concept of it is
lie,
big.
right? Even if you don't give up as much as you say, the trailers make it sound like you do. That's fine as long as the story's good, right? Because it leaves you wanting more. Okay, so that's okay. But the hook is to bring them in, and once they see it and it's a good movie, they'll keep coming, right? And that's what makes a $1 billion movie is repeat customers because the movie's just that damn good. So
Well, especially with a movie like this, where it is supposed to be mystical and there's a lot of mystery around this stuff. If it's good and good enough and intriguing enough to make you go, "Oh, I need to go watch that a second time." Now that I know how it ends, I have a different contextualization going into this movie, and I can understand it even more and more. Like that is, I think, when we're talking about fan expectations, is ultimately the goal. Because I remember with Rogue One and The Force Awakens specifically, when those two movies came out, because it was around the holidays and Christmas time and everything, you kind of went to the movies a couple times to see those movies. I didn't do it with Last Jedi, Solo, or Rise of Skywalker. I think I saw at least Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi twice in theaters, but I did not see them three times. The Force Awakens, I must have saw five times in theaters because it was such a good like holiday movie. It was fun. It was exciting, and I think that's a big thing with this movie to get repeat viewing is when you think of like some of the old Star Wars stuff, what did people do after Empire Strikes Back before Return of the Jedi came out? They kept watching Empire Strikes Back because they wanted to see what happened next. I think this movie, out of all of the movies that we have, out of the Ray movie and even the Mando movie that's going to come, this is the one that I feel like should have the most repeat value. Where when it comes out, you go, I need to see this again next week. Not only because it was really good, but because I'm excited for what comes next. And because I'm not going to get that for a little bit, I'm going to go see this one again. And like you said, that's how it gets $1 billion in the box office. But that's actually a huge question too, because we brought this up with the Ray Star Wars movie. Is this going to get $1 billion in the box office? Do you guys think this one has because I think out of all of them, it might have the least likelihood of hitting that billion? No?
I'm the other way around. No, again, a lot depends on the marketing. Like I said, when we talk about it, anything that's going to be $1 billion, it all depends on the marketing. No movie has hit $1 billion without any marketing. Okay, or any significant marketing, right? Even you think about the Joker, everyone was surprised. Oh, an R-rated movie hit $1 billion, but they marketed the hell out of the Joker. Okay, and it was everywhere when that movie was coming. So it does hinge on that. But yeah, like I said, people are a sucker for origin stories, and if if it does what it's supposed to do, those casual audiences and Star Wars fans, they're gonna keep coming back, and it'll hit that. I think it has more of a chance than a Rey movie, not because a Rey movie is inherently bad. I don't believe that. Right? It could be good. I'm gonna go see it. You know, I want to see what happens. But because there is so much animosity surrounding that character in the sequels, they have an uphill battle in that movie, right? Some would argue there's an uphill battle for any Star Wars movie, and that's true to an extent. But something that's so far removed from not just the sequels, but the original trilogy and the prequels, and it's an origin kind of deal, and it's the beginnings of what is the entirety of what makes Star Wars, is a huge draw and has a potential for that $1 billion movie. And
That's a great point. Because like you're saying, like when it comes to the Rey movie, you have to watch all 9 movies that come before it, and you got to at least watch the sequels. And when it comes to the Mando movie, you definitely have to watch all the Mando shows. If you don't, then you're missing out. This, you don't have to watch anything before it, and I think that kind of gives it a kind of liberation, and it's not really binded by other shows and projects and the quality of them to dictate its success. How do you feel about this? Do you feel like this movie is going to maybe reach that $1 billion mark?
I think a good percentage of that will lie on the state of Star Wars a year to a year and a half before the movie is set to release or does release. If this Rey movie comes out, and let's just say it makes $800 million in the box office, but overall fans were like, even fans who dislike Rey were satisfied, right? That will start a bit of a momentum in Lucasfilm's favor for bringing hype to this new movie. And I think if the Rey movie does decent and is pretty much liked by a good portion of the fandom, I do think that momentum will carry on over to a Dawn of the Jedi film, which is going to be more mature, more I don't even know if grounded is the right word, but more sophisticated, you know, not as much of a popcorn flick I would consider. I would say the Rey movie is going to be way more of a popcorn flick than this one. And so it is going to be hard to get those casual audiences on board. But I mean, Lunga brought up his good points. They love origin stories. And if you market this well, you market this that, you know, this is a new beginning, as we said in the thumbnail, then yeah, I can see it hitting $1 billion. But if this Rey movie bombs or, you know, makes $600 million, is just a disaster, it's horribly written, and it's just another meme for the Star Wars franchise, and the fandom is doomed, you know, then probably not, even if it's marketed well.
All right, so final question before we get into our last topic. Yes or no? We're going to do roundtable prediction again, like we did for the Rey movie. Does this movie make $1 billion in the box office whenever it releases? I'm going to say yes. Lunga, yes or no?
I want to say yes, obviously, but we know nothing really about it yet. You know what I mean? There's like,
yeah, but we know nothing about the Rey movie, but we were able to give a lot of context.
We have a lot of context for the Rey movie.
But that's what makes this one so interesting. Is because
we
there's
have
nothing
one line from Mangold, right? And that's it. That's all we have.
And it's a long ways away.
Right.
You got it, dude. Are you putting it on black or are you putting it on red? All right. It's a yes.
I said see if you're right or wrong. wanted to. Yeah. Well, I am not held responsible for. I am not responsible for bad writing. Okay, if the bad writing is bad writing, it's bad fucking writing. But does it have the potential? Yes.
Well, the Rey movie. I'm gonna say no.
No. Okay. Yeah.
I think the odds are simply outside of Lucasfilm's favor, and it's gonna take a lot of change for a.
But you were saying you're saying $2.5 billion for the Rey movie. Shut up. Get out.
$2.5. What the hell?
No, he was saying
you did hyperbolically. Like you did hyperbolically say the Rey movie was going to make over $2 billion.
Maybe. I said I would like to make it.
I thought
it'd be nice if it makes $2 billion, but or whatever. But no, I don't. I'm leaning more towards 750.
But you did say the Rey movie was going to hit $1 billion. You did say that.
And that was more of where you're standing now, where it's like, well, I don't really know, but I would say yes just because I want it to. Yeah. Yeah. So no, I'm going to say no.
I think with this one having the least limits on it out of all the future Star Wars movies, makes it most likely to not happen, but also the one with the biggest kind of I guess reward. Because if this goes really well, they really could start a new era in Star Wars to explore. They could set up a saga set in this time period. You talked about the Old Republic. I think this could be so far ahead of the Old Republic by like 5 to 10,000 years that that's not even something you have to consider for a long time. And then that gives us just even more time and eras to expand into and play with in the Star Wars universe. It makes it very interesting. And plus, you have things like, who are going to be the stormtrooper like military of this time period, if we're going to have anything like that. Like a lot of things in Star Wars, you kind of unfortunately have to make iconic and culturally relevant in the pop culture and in the world that we know today. And if a movie doesn't do that, it's not revered like some of the other projects. Like The Mandalorian had a huge pop culture impact, huge thing with Star Wars. Din Djarin, Baby Yoda, stuff like that. I Have Spoken, like that is cemented forever now. You didn't really get that with certain things like Solo or maybe even.
If you go with the numbers from that thing you read, 25,000 years, that's way more than a couple thousand years before the High Republic. It's way more. It's way more.
Yeah, I mean it's a long time, and I think that's really good. I think getting away, because that's been the complaint with Lucasfilm for a long time, is like, especially, oh my God, especially after they bought the damn company. Disney bought Lucasfilm, all they did was explore that 19-year gap between A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith. And it really has hindered a lot of things. And, I've made this argument many times before with the sequels. They really screwed themselves up because they screwed up 2 time periods. The time period between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens has now all been kind of the same thing that we start. And then the sequels, what comes after is the same thing that came after the original trilogy. So just that big chunk of time, that 100 years after the original trilogy, is just so uninteresting. But going in the past like this is a really great idea, because now you're not bound by a lot of things that you have to really set up for in the future.
And they'll bounce around. That can lead, like I said, the Rakatan Empire. That can lead to the first Mandalorian Wars. That can lead to Revan. That can lead to Bane. There's a lot of shit that's a jumping off point that goes boom, boom, boom down the timeline. Marching towards the original trilogy, the prequels.
Yeah. Well, last time
and the High Republic, because the High Republic's right in there too, in the middle.
Yeah, but the High Republic's only 200 years before the Phantom Menace, I think. Yeah, but it still is far enough too, because they have made it feel like a very distant history in the books that they've done. I have not caught up with the High Republic like after Phase 2. I don't think I've really read anything past Phase 1, but I've seen a lot of unhappy customers from what they've done with that project, which is unfortunate to see. But last topic before we close the show is, when do you think this movie's coming out? I mean, I know some of us are going to be like, oh, well, it's not coming out at all. But like from some of the reports that we had, it was, it's definitely not 2026. It's definitely not 2027. It might be 2028, 29. With the way things are going right now and the strikes and the James Bond, I mean, if we're talking 2029, that's 6 years away. We're about to be 5 because we're going to hit 2024. But when you think of when this movie's coming out, is this going to be the 3rd film where we have like Rey's movie, Mando movie, and then this one? Or do you think there's going to be even a bigger gap in time until we get this one?
I don't think it's going to be that far. But the strikes definitely caused a lot of problems across the board for the whole industry.
Yeah,
and we're seeing a lot of now the Daredevil thing that Marvel's doing. Andor season 2 we saw is not next year, 2025 for Andor season 2. So right. So that's mostly because of that. That is not a production issue. That is not rewrites. It's none of that stuff. It's they're behind. They're behind, right? And they got to get all this other stuff that they were doing done before they get into this. So conservatively, I would say, are we still sticking with every Star Wars movie always coming around Christmas? Are we going to have a summer movie?
That seems like, because here was the thing. Apparently, before the strike, the plan was to have the Rey movie in 2025. A year later, the Dave Filoni movie in December 2026. and then another one I think in 2027. But then the strikes
I
happen and they change. Like the
Yeah.
release dates they have now is May and December of 2026, and then December of 2027. I don't think that May
Here's
2026
the
date is
thing.
going to happen.
Because of this, okay, I could see the Filoni movie and this movie both coming out in 2027. One could be a summer, and one could be a winter. I could see that
Yeah.
happening. They could both come out because they're not related, right? They're two completely different eras and so far apart from each other, right? They don't have to mesh with each other. They don't have to. It's not like Marvel movies where they have to kind of go into each other. You know what I mean? So I could see. I mean, because if you think about it, they're probably both at the same stage right now. The Ray movie's a little bit ahead, right? Even though people thought there was a script, and I kept saying there was no fucking script. Oh yeah, let me say it here while we're on the air. I said there was no fucking script. God damn it. Okay, there's no fucking script.
Well, hang on. There was a script that was being worked on before the strike. They said that the
there was
draft would be
rumors
in 6 weeks.
that there was a script being worked on.
But
nothing by Lucasfilm has said we have a script.
No, Kathleen Kennedy herself said that it was before the strikes happened. It was after Celebration that the script, they're waiting about 3 to 4 weeks and the script should be finished, right? But
yeah, and she also said that Obi-Wan's script was done 5 years ago.
Well, they rewrote it.
It was done, but it wasn't good, and so they tossed everything out after they announced it.
It wasn't good, and they made something that was also bad. So here we are.
But yeah,
no, the script's not done, but there is a script being written.
From the way they made it sound, it's like they're starting on it. They're starting on it, the script.
No,
okay,
no,
not like there was one.
Don't forget the guy who left the script. No. Okay, expert, but you didn't know who the Prime Jet. I'm playing with you, but no,
I know about Ray. That's it.
Daniel Lindelof, whatever the fuck.
Damon Lindelof had his many drafts made for this. Okay, that was sent over to Lucasfilm. They decided to part ways with him. Whatever the fuck his name is. No, see, my brain's all turned off by it. What the hell's what's his name? Who's writing the new script? My brain's dead right now. Who's writing the new script?
For what? The
Ray movie? Who took over Damon's script?
I fucking know. Stephen Knight.
Stephen Knight came over and he was revisioning the script, right? Okay, first draft. Kathleen Kennedy said that they're waiting for his first draft to be submitted. It should be submitted within 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, the strikes happened in the middle of that 2 to 4 week period. Okay, strikes ended. He's still working on it. They haven't gotten a script draft sent in.
Yeah,
so
he had a document open on his computer that said Ray movie. That's what he had.
You don't write an entire script in 2 weeks, right?
I beg to differ. There have been plenty of movies that have been written in it. There's writers out there for movies that are popping out scripts left and right. Okay, what takes long is revisioning it and changing it. Okay. Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. It's called Adderall now, but yeah, they're still doing it. But no, they can. What takes popping out the script is not the issue. They can pop out. They all pop out scripts quickly. It's the revisions. It's okay. This is what I got. Okay, let's go. Okay,
right. The new draft.
That's a good base. Let's think about this and then write a whole nother draft. Right, and they'll have 10, 12 drafts before they have a script in principle. Right. So I mean, that happens a lot. There was no script. They said they had a script ready. That is not the same thing as. There's not the same thing as I have an outline. It's not the same thing.
I know.
Yeah. But anyways. I mean, that's all in the Ray movie. I mean, this movie with James Mangold, it seems like he at least started when he talked about writing it, and this was back in April. It seems like at least he was gonna, like you're saying, Lunga, pull up his Word or whatever they use to write for the movies, type in Dawn of the Jedi, title ?
Yeah.
Episode 1, the beginning. Like he's probably just now thinking of like what he wants his story to be.
You got to remember, we got to keep this in mind too. And I'm sure there's some hard diehards out there, diehard guild members that are like, I am not doing, just like, there's the people that are like, there's people who do not look at their email when they're not at work because they're like, nope, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not doing it. I'm sure there's diehards that are like, nope, I'm not touching my computer. I'm not writing a one word. Okay. Yeah. But I'm sure there are other people, especially someone as big as Mangold. I'm not saying he did, but it's a possibility. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are still writing. They just didn't submit anything. They just didn't turn anything in. You know what I mean? They just wrote it. So they're like, okay,
Yeah,
well,
you
when the time
were free
comes,
to write, but you couldn't go to any executives. You couldn't go to anyone.
right? That's what I'm saying. You
It
couldn't
was
submit
all in
anything.
your
You
own
couldn't
time.
talk to anyone
All in
about
private, I guess.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure they could tap away at their keyboard and just write a bunch of shit. You know what I mean? So that when the time comes, you're like,
What are
okay,
they
I
gonna
got
do?
all this shit
Invade your
here.
home?
Right.
Be like, hey,
So
you can't be writing this movie.
yeah. So I mean, but again, the point I was getting at was I think like Filoni's movies and Mangold's movie, they're at the same stage right now. I believe they're both at around the same stage. So they could very well both come out in have 2 Star Wars movies in 2027. Just because they're so far
Yeah.
behind, I think they need something. They can't just keep waiting. You know, what I mean, they can't do this one a year and wait until 2030. You know, what I mean, it's
Yeah,
too
it's
far.
too much of a gap and too much unknown. I mean, I will say because I was looking up James Mangold's like kind of schedule right now, and he has to do that Bob Dylan film, and we talked about that. It's called A Complete Unknown, and Bob Dylan's an amazing artist. If you don't know who he is, um, you know, learn about life. I guess I don't fucking know. 2024 February is when they're supposed to start filming that movie, and one of the articles was saying that it should be out by fall of next year, the end of the year. That might be a little short, but it does seem like at least by 2025, James Mangold will be completely available to just focus on his Star Wars movie. And so I do think a 2027, 2028 release date is very possible because of that. But he also apparently has to write and direct the Swamp Thing for DC. But some reports from Bestman Bolton, I think Jeff Snyder, were saying that his focus after this Bob Dylan movie is going to be Star Wars and then the DC movie after that. I just hope we don't get a situation like with Patty Jenkins of, oh, she can't focus on all of Star Wars right now because she has these other film obligations. Or that's the same excuse they
Completely
made of
different
Ryan
environment
Johnson.
with with different consideration with James Gunn. Swamp Thing being just me being a DC guy that I am. Well, see, they want a Swamp Thing. James Gunn knows that Swamp Thing isn't an urgent movie that has to come out immediately, right? There's a lot more stuff that has to be set up in DC universe. So
Yeah,
Swamp
I know
Thing
he's got to
can
do the
wait.
Superman legacy thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you
And
don't
there's
think
the
Swamp
Brave and the
Thing
Bold stuff.
is even remotely on the horizon for DC?
No.
Like, do you think that they're you think DC will be okay if James Mangold
Yes.
delivers that film years later to work on Star Wars?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Definitely. 'Cause
I
we're
like that though.
yeah,
That
so
gives me
I'm not
confidence.
too worried about that. And that's the other that's the other issue, right? That's what's causing the stuff here is the log jam, right? Because you have people that have
Mhm.
2 or 3 movies that they're doing, right? And originally it was scheduled spread out. Okay, I can do this, this, this. Now it's like everyone wants to get their movies made all at once. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
shit, I got to do all of these different. And then when you think about all the casting that has to be done, that was on hold.
Well,
You've
even look
talked
at
about
Taika
this.
Waititi. He can't do his Star Wars film right now because
Yeah.
he's been doing
Oh,
so
yeah,
many
yeah.
projects.
Well, because he was, I mean, he's not poor now like he was with Thor, which is the only reason why he did it. So he,
Yeah, I
read
like the
18 pages
honesty.
of a 24-page comic book and what, you see the love this man has for the IP, which reflected in his damn Thor movies. But, yeah, so there's a logjam, right? And they got to get all this done. And like I said, the casting has to be done for things, and they're all behind that. And we've talked about this plenty of times. You've talked about it a lot on other shows over the years. The scheduling for principal photography, the locations, the studios, the places they do stuff, that now is all fucking backed up, right? And backlogged. And now everyone's scrambling to get to locations and get in the schedule to do things. And it's all backed up, right? It's all on back order, if you will, or whatever the case is. So that's the big issue. So it's not this when people think it's like, oh, the writers on strike, there's no scripts. The script isn't the issue. It's not the scripts. It's everything else that's involved in making a movie.
Yeah, and they take a very long time to make, and we've seen that clearly with Star Wars and what we've had so far. I mean, you don't want a situation like Rise of Skywalker where it's like you kind of have less than 2 years to write and make this fucking movie. And by the way, good luck. So yeah, it's an interesting situation to be in. But any final thoughts before we close up the show on this James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi movie?
I will say I can see it coming out 2 years after the Rey movie comes out, whatever time period that comes to be in. I'm imagining Rey's movie comes out at the earliest December of 2026. And then 2 years after, whenever that comes out, I think if this movie goes through, theoretically, it will come out 2 years after. I still don't believe Dave Filoni is gonna actually have his movie go through, but because of that, I'm not going to guess when his movie will come out. It could come out in between the Rey movie and the Dawn of the Jedi. I think that's very possible. But 2 years after, so probably 2028.
Well, and they have said the plan right now over there at Lucasfilm is the Rey movie first and then the Dave Filoni movie. But I will say for Dave Filoni's part, that guy's going to have a very rough 3 or 4 years ahead of him if that's the case, because Ahsoka season 2 is a likely possibility to happen. It should happen, and I think a lot of us are expecting it to. So he has to write and make that. Season 4 of The Mandalorian's coming out. We're getting Tales of the Jedi season 2. There's what was the other one? He's got his movie, which is going to take a while too, and then Skeleton Crew. Like, he has to set up his movie, and to set it up, he has to use all these other shows. And then don't forget his new role as COO, where he's involved on all the stories. His movie is going to be a really big hurdle for him to get over. And there's even an animated series that they haven't announced yet that is, in the works. So there's stuff like that where it's like he's got his hand in everything, and then he has to do something that's pretty much all on his own, which is write and direct his own Star Wars movie, and then do Ahsoka season 2, and then also like that. Dave's got a lot on his plate now. I think his test is right now. I don't think any of the stuff he's done in the past matters. I think what he's doing right now is going to be the most important chapter of his career over there at Lucasfilm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good time to wrap up the show. If you guys are still watching, please leave a like and subscribe to the Chatooine Show. Follow us on all our social media accounts. And we are now monetized, at least for Super Chat. So any show that we do, if you guys want us to react to any of your comments or anything like that, or any topics and suggestions you have for us, send us a Super Chat and we'll read it out here on the show. And support us by joining us on everything: Discord, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Is MySpace still a thing? Lunga, is that still around?
Why? Okay. Wait, ask Lunga. Really?
Because I do not remember MySpace. I remember Facebook coming out. I remember MySpace was the thing, but I don't remember any of that shit. I remember.
Right. I wasn't friends with MySpace Tom. It's just it wasn't. I wasn't friends with him.
That's a reference me and Papa Memes will never get.
Nope.
I've heard of it, but yeah,
Google it.
Google it.
I don't know if I want to.
They weren't saying that 20 years ago.
Yeah. See, I remember. I was alive, before Google, guys. I was at Ask Jeeves. I was doing shit like that. That's a real thing, by the way. I don't know if you know. Ask Jeeves was an actual.
So was Going Postal. That was a big thing too.
Sorry. Someone asked. Actually, let's. Nick says, "How do we get the Discord link? Isn't it in the descriptions of the videos?"
It should be. It should.
But
be
I can put it out there if
let's see.
It's not.
No, it should be. I normally with the copy and paste.
It's there.
Yeah,
it's in the description.
I have not been in it yet, but yes, it should be in the description. So yeah, if you guys are looking to join anything like our Discord, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, we just created a Facebook page today. We're going to start doing stuff on that. All of that is in the description, and then don't forget at the end of this year, we're going to be doing the switching over to like podcasts and stuff. We'll still be on YouTube, but we're going to start uploading the podcast as well.
And merch. We can actually open a merch store too, so we can do shirts.
That too. And I don't think I set up the calendar for this next for today's show, but I think next week is going to be the Bad Batch season 2 episode. So I think that's next week's topic. I'll post tomorrow on all the social medias what our shows are for the rest of the month. So yeah, tune in for that. And we also have the Christmas special coming up this month, and then we're having a Christmas break right after that, even though it's after Christmas. We all need a break. So thank you guys for tuning into today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like to support the show. We will see you guys next week on Wednesday night here on Chatooine.
Wow.